That's a really good question. Yeah, that's such a great question. That's a good question. No, that's actually a really interesting question. It's a good question.
I ask all the tough questions, by the way.
I have an answer for you.
Let's go. Let's fucking go. Age range of your students, the children, the great minds that we're teaching now.
Yeah, so I teach during the school year at Drake and Grandview. Kind of split my time between both. It depends on the semester. So those are either freshmen all the way through senior. Just depends.
In college.
In college, yes.
Okay.
So currently Grandview, and it's typical of the classes I teach there, usually on the earlier side of that. I usually get freshmen and sophomores that are just starting out their arts career there. And then this semester, it's been really fun at Drake. I'm actually teaching the senior design practicum. So basically the senior thesis for graphic design students.
Okay, so those are big words for Rich. Tell me what that means.
So in a nutshell, well, whatever you majored in college, if you went to college, you probably had some sort of culminating, I don't know, thesis or something that you had to complete maybe for your degree.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for graphic designers, the goal of this course is that you create your like visual brand identity. So what are like the colors, the logo you're going to utilize, the typefaces, any of that is going to be associated with you when you're a professional working in the field. So we start by talking about kind of what do you value just in your own life and in a future career to think about where they might want to work, because graphic design, it's a really big umbrella. There's a lot that fits under that. And then from that, they start to build out their like a mood board, identifying colors and typefaces and other elements that would speak to them as a designer. And then from that, they produce resume, cover letter, business card, all branded with their visual identity. And then finally a portfolio, which is their hopefully
Actual
key
work.
to get a job, right? That you would present that in a job interview.
How hard is it to get a job as an illustrator these days?
It's hard.
Is it?
It's
Is there
there's
not a lot of work out there, or is it a packed industry full of people?
I'd say it's a pretty packed industry with a lot of really talented people.
Right.
And like graphic design, it's a big umbrella. There's so many different ways you can go with that. So, you know, mine is like kind of one niche of that. But yeah, I think it's what you make it.
I mean, I'm in technology, and
Yeah.
it's pretty packed, but there's still probably lots of jobs. But also, there's so many different things that you could do within technology. So I could see that in art, in illustration, there could be a lot of things too. Now, you teach people illustration not on a computer, right? You teach them pen and paper
Both,
illustration?
actually.
Okay.
So my degree is in graphic design, also at Drake. So what I'm teaching right now, I actually went through myself. It's changed a bit since then, but so at both schools, I teach a variety. Grandview tends to be more on the traditional media side. So by that, I mean I teach the intro drawing classes, some of the intro design classes, and then a little bit there, but also mostly at Drake on the graphic design side of things. So while we do some sketches by hand potentially for a project, and there's certainly ways that certain students that maybe gravitate towards illustration and maybe have like me, like a double major or a minor in something on the fine art side, they can bring that in. But what I'm teaching them works with kind of the technology that's standard for the industry. So Adobe suite of like InDesign, Illustrator, Photoshop. And I do teach a class that specifically teaches how to use those programs as well. So it's a mix.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a good balance.
Yeah. Okay, so you're a teacher in that, and you also teach yoga.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into the yoga too much because Lauren ruined that for you.
Darn it,
She
Lauren.
talked about yoga way before you. But do you, obviously they're two totally different things.
Yeah.
Do you see any similarities?
Definitely.
Do you?
I would actually, so yoga was my entry into teaching in general. So I actually started with bar. That's B-A-R-R-E, not B-A-R.
Sure. She was in the bars a lot.
Yeah, right. And that was in 2018. And another fellow teacher at the time encouraged me to go through the training. And I am somebody that's really more of an introvert, and I don't like public speaking and things like that.
Right.
So, I mean, she was somebody I looked up to and was like, sure, if Mary Kay thinks I can do this, I'll try it.
Sure.
So I went through it, and I was decent at it. I got hired to teach. And then subsequently going through that process, and Rich, you've been through a teacher training. I think you know kind of, especially with yoga teacher training, that you do 200 hours, what a life-changing experience that can be. But even with bar, which was shorter, I think 4 or 5 weeks, it was life-changing for me. I kind of reassessed what I valued. I was at the time working as a graphic designer at Meredith, more on the marketing side of things. I started on the publication side, which I enjoyed more, and dependent on where they were hiring, kind of got moved around a little bit. And I'd done that for a few years, and I went through teacher training and reassessed things and quit that job.
Did you go through teacher training after you became an illustrator through Drake?
Did I go through teacher training? So I've always been somebody who's drawn and painted all my life. I would say the transition to saying I'm an illustrator has been, it wasn't like a hard stop. Like, oh, I wake up one day and I am an illustrator.
I see.
There's a lot of imposter syndrome related to that, but I won't get into that here. But so anyway, I was telling that maybe not in the clearest way, but I went through the first teacher training and ended up quitting my corporate job as a graphic designer because I just realized it wasn't fulfilling me. And fortunately, prior to that, for the probably year, 6 months to a year before that, while I was working as a graphic designer, I was doing a lot of illustration work on my own at home when I had time.
Okay.
And frankly, going into work late some days because I would do some in the morning. And you know, that was a sign. I was like, you really don't like this job anymore. You're not even getting there on time. I was like, okay, don't burn any bridges. I need to get out of this. But I'd also sent out, at the time, it was probably actual physical Illustrator postcards.
Okay.
We don't do that so much more in the industry. Like since the pandemic, so many people work from home, but we used to send Illustrator postcards to art directors at publishing houses or at agencies, right, to get representation or to get hired to illustrate.
Right.
I'd done a little bit of that on the back burner, and you know, you send something out, you don't hear about it for a while. But lo and behold, I quit my job, and I don't remember if it happened right before that or pretty close after that. I got hired to illustrate my first book, which seemingly came out of the blue, but I like to remind myself that I was kind of putting down those breadcrumbs, you know, like laying down that path to make that happen. So that was really serendipitous that it aligned, and I quit my job seemingly out of the blue. But I had work.
You had work, right?
And so that was, again, I think definitely imposter syndrome, because it was like, okay, I know how to paint and I know how to draw, but now I've been hired to do a whole book. And I have like made like little booklets stapled together as a kid, like filled out blank books, written stories when I was little.
So you hadn't done any of that.
But I hadn't done it like as the
job.
real thing.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
I ended up joining SCBWI. It's the longest acronym. It's the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. Around that time, I had a fellow illustrator friend who told me, if you want to get into this industry, this is the professional organization for that. It's a great resource. And that was a huge help for me because I became a part of that community. Each state, including Iowa, has its own chapter, and kind of learned the ropes as
From
I was doing the thing. Yeah, exactly.
That's how we always learn things.
Right? Just jump in the deep end.
You can go to college and you can learn something, but you're not really going to know how to do it until you start doing it in real life. Yeah.
And that's actually an interesting point that you mentioned, because I was talking to somebody about this just yesterday. My seniors at Drake, again, for that design practicum, they were going through professional portfolio reviews where we bring in people from the community who are graphic designers to come and look at their work. Basically like a mock job interview.
Sure.
And yeah, I had some of the reviewers leaving saying, wow, I wish I had this when I was in school. Like, this is as close as you can get to that real world experience.
Right.
Which is great. But I think you're also right. Like, you can never quite mimic
really
that. You just have to do the thing.
Yeah, you have to go in and do it. You have to be strong enough to find the job, interview for the job, get the job, and then just do the job.
Yeah.
It's just as simple as that. And then you're going to stumble. Doesn't matter what you do.
Yeah.
Whether you're a plumber, whether you're an illustrator, whether you're in IT, you're going to stumble. You're going to make mistakes. Yeah. You're going to illustrate something that you think is amazing, and the person who gets to approve it says, nope, this ain't gonna happen.
That's what I was talking to 2 young men that came and wanted to hear about illustration this afternoon. We were looking at Pony the Moose. The book came out in July, and then I have one that came out in October with the same publisher. And as with that particular publisher and others, before you get hired to do a book as an illustrator, you might be asked to do some spec work, and by that I mean speculation. So they ask you to do maybe a cover, some character sketches, just to get an idea you're the right illustrator. They've asked other illustrators. And twice before those 2 books came out, I did that work, not paid, but I did it, was proud of it, gave it to them, and they didn't choose me, right?
Yep.
So yeah, that's very much part and parcel of the job.
I mean, they didn't choose a lot of people because only one person can be chosen, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that's the difficult part is understanding that you weren't the one for this project, but you might be the one for the next project.
Yeah.
And then when you are the one for the next project, do you ever think about the people who weren't the one?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Almost more in the reverse, I guess. Like I remember going back and looking at this publisher's website for the first one that I was rejected for, and I was like, oh, that's who they chose. Okay, like that's a really good fit. Like I think it was humbling to be like, oh, okay, I see what they're going for. I wasn't quite the right fit for that.
Right.
Even though I like the work that I did for it and I'm proud of it, I can see why they chose what they did.
Right.
So yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that
But when
next
you
time
were the
around,
choice,
Rich, if I'm the choice.
There
I
were
think I'm just
probably,
excited to be the
30
choice.
to 50 people who weren't the
Depends
choice.
probably on the size of the
Who
publisher.
knows?
Yeah.
So, I mean, if there's that many illustrators out there, there should be 30 to 50 putting in work, hopefully, to try to get a job.
People that want it just as much.
Yeah, just as difficult.
Yeah.
And do you find that you got Pony the Moose? Pony the Moose is a children's book that Claire illustrated. Do you feel like you were chosen because you put forth your authentic self? You didn't try to necessarily give them what you might have thought you wanted?
Yeah, that's such a great question, Rich. Yes, that's something that I have an Illustrator critique group, and a particular friend in that group has said before, and I've heard it other places too, especially within this industry. Like there are trends, of course, but they're fickle, right? They change. So the moment you start chasing a trend, by the time you might put work in front of the gatekeeper, right? The publisher, the editor who's going to care about it, it's already passed, right? And you're probably not as passionate about it because it's not authentic to you, right?
Right.
So yes, that is a hard thing. Yeah, when you get rejections for it, if you're doing the thing that you love that feels authentic to you. But I think in the long run, that's wise. So yes, I think the work I did was authentic to me. It might have helped that the moose was the main character or one of the main characters because I love doing animals and I think I'm pretty good at that. Although actually a funny little anecdote to that, I think they discovered this after it was after I was hired and after I'd done the character sketches, and I think I was working on some of the interior pages. This particular publisher, not always, but in some cases with small publishers, gives the author a little bit of feedback to the illustrator. And I think it was the author that noticed, actually, the way that you've drawn the moose's legs, I think it was maybe the hind legs, or maybe it was the front, they bent in the wrong direction.
Oh, no.
You know, like where the joint is.
Absolutely.
I looked at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're right. I'm glad you noticed that. So I'm not perfect at animals.
Of course
that's
not.
for sure.
Sure. We're not perfect at everything.
No.
Right. So, but now you're perfect at drawing moose legs.
I'm pretty darn good at moose legs.
Yeah, because you had to redo that shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah. Fortunately, it wasn't that many occurrences. I think I kind of fixed it without realizing it later on.
So what kind of advice do you give these, I'm going to call them children because I'm so old.
Yeah.
What kind of advice do you give these children to let them be ready for that rejection? I feel like so many young children are not ready for rejection.
Yeah, especially this current generation. No
They're
offense to
used
Gen
to so
Zers,
many,
but...
what do they call them? Participation trophies. They're used to that kind of stuff. They're used to getting kind of whatever they want.
Yeah.
The prices of electronics are so low now. TV's like $300, so it's not like giving them Xboxes and PlayStations is that hard. So now they're not used to this rejection, and here you are sending them off into the world of illustrators, and they're going to join a sea of illustrators.
Yeah.
Is there any type of advice you give them to say, hey, you might not get the first job, you might not get the 50th job, but you're going to get the job. You're going to get a job at some point?
I've literally said pretty close to those same words.
Okay.
I'm going to say to my seniors at Drake, especially because they are in a position where they will graduate in the spring. And we've been talking about, and actually tomorrow when we meet again, we're going to make a job search plan. And they've already thought about kind of, do they want to work as an in-house graphic designer at an agency? And we've visited some places like that. But I have told them, it may not be your dream job that you immediately land. Most people don't. And that's the reality. I think in some ways, especially the younger generation, maybe isn't so used to not having things come their way. But at the same time, this is an interesting group because, I obviously have my bias being somebody that I worked a job that I enjoyed at Meredith, right? I was happy to have that job after I graduated, but it ultimately became something I didn't love, and I quit that, and that took a lot of courage and maybe it was a little naivety too along with that,
Sure.
but I was young.
Right.
And kind of jumped into the deep end to do freelance and teaching and all that came. And talking to these seniors, I think they're very pragmatic in a lot of ways too. That, I mean, life's hard, economy, all that. You got to pay the bills. And they're like, I just want a job that I can, and we had
Pay some
prioritized
bills.
certain things that are important to them, whether it's work culture or like the environment that they work in. They do have preferences. But yeah, I do feel like they're a little bit pragmatic about that, more so than, I tell them my story and it's like, I wouldn't do that, Claire.
Yeah, they wouldn't do that.
I wouldn't just quit that job, but
They don't know that yet.
I don't know that yet. That's true.
Yeah.
I'd say like as preparation to for art and design students, part of that curriculum is that you do class critiques. So we always emphasize, myself especially, this idea of constructive criticism, right?
Right,
Those
right.
two words are key. And I was actually talking to another professor at Grandview today who teaches printmaking this semester. And I know she has some of my previous students that I've taught in drawing. And she told me how great those students are in her class that I had at critique and giving
nice.
constructive comments. And that was a compliment to me because
Yeah,
I'm like,
absolutely.
okay, I did my job where you're not just saying to your peers, especially your friends, I like this. This looks good.
Yeah.
That feels good, but it's not helpful,
It's not helpful,
right? There's
right.
always something you can improve. And the hard thing is art is subjective. I hate giving letter grades, right?
That's
like
tough. That's
it's
tough, yeah.
I don't like to have to land on, something so specific as that, but there is something you can always give constructive commentary on.
Sure.
So getting them used to receiving feedback that not thinking of it as a negative if it's something that somebody thinks they could change or do better.
Right. So a long time ago, I was in college prep art. I think it was called AP art in high school.
You took AP art in high school?
Yeah.
So did I.
So
Look at you. We got to talk about this afterwards.
yeah, we're gonna talk about it right now. So I was in class, and there was maybe 5 of us, and we were in a normal drawing class. It was
Yeah.
a basic. It was a drawing 1 probably, but there were 5 of us in this class. There were 5 of us in AP art, and
Yeah.
they didn't have just one class for it.
Okay.
So we sat in the back, and we just worked on our portfolios.
Yeah.
Because that's what we were supposed to do, just get our portfolios ready to be sent off.
Yeah.
And this new kid comes in the class, and he walks back to us, and I was the only one with a seat next to me that was empty. And he says, she told me I'm supposed to come back here with you guys. And I said, are you an AP art? He goes, I guess.
I am now.
So I thought to myself, well, that's kind of a weird, I would think you would know.
Right.
Like, I go, have you ever been in an art class before? And he goes, nope. I go, so I looked at him and I thought, well, what do I do here?
Yeah.
So I said, well, this probably isn't the class for you, but I'd say sit down and do something. So he's like, what do I do? So I pointed him to the paper, different weights, what they're for, watercolor, yada, yada. He's like, yeah, but I said, go get a piece of paper, go get a bunch of markers, come back. So he came back with the markers. I said, all right, go get some water and go get some paintbrushes.
Yeah.
So I didn't know what to do. I turned into his art teacher essentially. But meanwhile, I had this, what was the name of those pins? The stethograph pins or something? The really thin,
Oh,
what are
I know
those
what you're
called?
talking about.
I can't remember the name
yeah.
of them. But I had a set of those pins. You had to fill them up with ink after they went out. And I was working on a pile of coins underneath a dragon that I had drawn, and I was meticulously drawing every detail of these coins, right? And he's like, oh, that looks awesome. That looks amazing. I'm like, thanks. And then so he goes and so I'm working on this detailed drawing. This is dragons breathing fire on a knight, right? This is an ink,
Fantastic.
something I have been doing for a very long time.
Yeah.
And he goes and gets the water, and he gets the brush. He comes back. He says, now what? I said, just take the markers and just draw something, anything, whatever comes to mind. So he does that, and then he's like, okay. And I said, now take the brush and the water and do something with it. So at the end of the class, the drawing board lockers were behind us, and all the kids that were in the drawing class came back to our area to put their drawing boards up, and almost every kid told him how much they loved what he had done, and nobody had ever said anything to me about my extremely detailed ink drawing
That you'd labored on.
I was torn apart. I was like, man, and he just looked at me and goes,
enough.
he looks at me and goes, I'm sorry, man. And I'm getting a little emotional right now. And I said, it's okay. That's just the way it goes. My art's for me and your art's for you and them. You know, they like that kind of stuff. So
And
that
do you know,
works
has
out.
he gone off to be
I
some
have
highly
no
acclaimed
idea.
artist?
Probably.
Maybe better that we don't Google
That
him
I
then.
should not know. Yeah.
I feel like that's a good metaphor, or I don't know if that's the right word for this, but also for teaching.
That's just art and teaching.
Well, you were teaching him, and
Yeah.
oftentimes teaching goes unthanked and unappreciated, right? Like that to me is the other point of your story too.
That was the wildest thing ever. I could not
That's
believe
funny. Do you still have this dragon drawing? Do you keep some
It
of
got
these
stolen.
pieces?
It got stolen out of the. So
Well, somebody liked
it was the
then.
ultimate compliment. I was so happy that it got stolen. It was so weird. And I was tired of looking at that damn thing.
Yeah, right. Like I don't want it anymore.
I probably spent, I don't know, 8 or 9 hours on it at
Sounds
that point.
fantastic.
So, I mean, maybe even more, honestly.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, sometimes a piece of artwork's never even finished. So,
Mm-hmm.
so tell me about that. Have you ever not finished an art piece? Is there something out there that you've gone a certain distance and you couldn't get over that, whatever that edge was?
That's a good question. I would say maybe not like a specific painting or drawing itself, but maybe definitely like a story idea for a children's book. Since I've been doing that for, especially since I quit my corporate job in 2018, I've had so many ideas that come to mind. And, you know, at first spark, you're like super excited about it. And, you know, you're writing notes and maybe doing some character sketches. And then either you get busy or you just kind of get bored of that idea and you kind of let it sit. And yeah, some of those, I have a filing cabinet that has some of those ideas in there that were maybe not a flop, but I just didn't finish it. It just didn't go anywhere.
Which one hit your brain first?
Which idea?
Yeah.
Out of any of those?
Out of any of them, which one comes to mind right away?
Specifically? Some of the earlier ones I was working on, there was one about a ballerina, and there was one, I'm trying to think which other ones I didn't make into dummy books that I fully illustrated. There was another one that I studied abroad in Italy, and I had one that took place in Italy that had to do with pasta. I don't know if you ever read Stregonona, that classic with Big Anthony and the pasta pot.
No.
Probably inspired a little bit by that. That was a favorite of mine. Yeah, those are two that immediately come to mind. But then in other cases, like what's up on my wall at my mainframe studio right now, which I have multiple walls on there, of course, right? But the wall that I storyboard ideas on and put up in progress work, what's currently there is an idea that I didn't really have a story idea for it fully, but I had a character in mind that I wanted to draw back in, it was maybe the first year I was teaching, maybe the second year I was teaching at Grandview, because when my students draw, I often draw in class too.
Yeah, sure.
I'm there to
Makes sense.
facilitate and help them
Sure.
when they need it, but I also can get some time to work. Anyway, so yeah, this was an idea I came up with and did a little bit of drawing for back in like 2020, 2021. And then over the summer, I don't know what brought it back to mind, but I started thinking about it again and I was like, oh, I know what that story is about now. And I pulled that out and I've been working on that in between. I've been a little bit busy lately. I haven't worked as much as I would like on it, but that's what I'm working on now. That's however many years ago. So sometimes they do resurface.
I have an idea for you.
I want to hear it.
How about, recently in my life, I've received probably more gift cards, cards in the mail, Christmas cards, things like that.
Yeah.
Like I was never the receiver of those things. I don't know why they didn't come to me, but
It's because Des Moines is a great place and I give you Christmas cards.
You do.
Yeah.
absolutely. I'm wondering if you couldn't pen a small story that plays out over a succession of cards that people could buy and then send them to one person that they care so much about, long distance. So the person would get a little bit of the story and then they would get some more of the story and then they would get some more of the story.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah.
I love that. Or even like it makes me think of too like those kind of exercises where it's a story that's not fully ended and somebody else, like you send it to somebody and they have the opportunity to add on to that or
Yes.
create the ending for it.
Right.
Yeah, kind of like it's a serialized sort of story too.
Right.
I love that.
I think that would be interesting.
Yeah.
Kind of bring back because cards are still being sent, but also they're not as interactive as they should be.
I think you make a good point, right? That would be a way to interact with it and maybe to hold on to it versus,
It'd
you
be
read the
really
message
neat.
and then you recycle it.
It'd be really neat if you could make a choose your own adventure card set. Where the person texts you and then you send out the next card.
I love that idea.
I wonder how you could make that.
Okay, we're
happen.
going to brainstorm further on this. I really like this.
Yeah.
That's fun. Yeah, the choose your own adventure, that's not something that I've done a lot with myself, but I have a really great example of that in my studio of a book that does that. In a singular book that you can imagine like a vertically oriented book, right? Maybe say it's like 8x10, and the pages are cut horizontally so that if you lift one
yes.
flap, you read one part of the story, but then there's endless variations because say there's 3 strips, right?
Sure.
And you can
So
change
you know
how
what
that
I mean
goes.
by choose your own adventure?
Yeah.
Have you seen those books a long time ago?
I don't know that I've seen like a traditional one in the sense that you're speaking about.
Yeah, so
Tell me more.
you'll read a little bit of, or maybe a chapter, but not
Yeah.
really a chapter. You'll read a couple pages, and it'll
Yeah.
say, if you want to go into the haunted house,
Yeah.
flip to page 23. If you want to go into the graveyard, flip to page whatever, and then you work your way through this book, and then you get to the end, whatever end you choose. So it was kind of interesting. That was something that was around when I remember that when I was a kid.
Well, it's much more, I mean, it gives the reader autonomy, which is kind of cool.
Right. They can literally choose their own
you can
adventure, and you
choose.
can reread it and go into the haunted house instead of going into the cemetery or whatever it was. But you would meet things on the way.
Okay, I'm putting a pin in this as my summer project when
Okay.
I have time to work on this, Rich, and I'm going to come back to this with you. I love that idea.
I mean, I think it's an interesting idea. I just came up with it while we're sitting here. I do that sometimes, and then they fly away. They're like butterflies; they fly
No,
away.
keep me
So,
accountable on this. I like that.
So I think that a card set where you have one targeted person would be good for. Well, they'd be good for men
Yeah.
because they could show affection, right?
Yes.
And it would be set up for them
Yes.
in a way.
I like that.
So I think that romantic cards that told a story
Yeah.
to their to-be lover or their lover or their wife or whatever, that would be great for them. But I think women probably send more cards anyway. But
Probably.
and
but, yeah.
also then you could have best friend cards.
Yeah.
It could be a story about best friends.
Oh, yeah, you could hit any sort
Yeah.
of particular audience with
And
that.
then once a week, you every Wednesday you put it drop it in the first one in the mail, then you schedule to drop the second one in the mail or whatever. And
Sounds like a real moneymaker for me.
I mean, I don't know that it is.
Hallmark
I don't
is
know
going to
what-
pick this up.
I don't know. Yeah, hopefully they don't watch this. Anyway, so do you do any cards other than the cards that you do? Do you have a publisher that?
I don't. Yeah, that's something that I've kind of thought about in the past, but I feel like I wear so many hats. It's been a process over the past almost 10 years probably 10 years thinking about when I graduated from college. And when I graduated from college, I said yes to everything. And I tell my
Sure.
soon-to-be grads, say yes to every opportunity that comes your way. And then after a few years, you start to kind of cull those things and kind of focus a little bit more narrowly on that. It would be great to be able to make some income doing that. I've sold some locally, and I still do. It's not something that I put a ton. I think I could do it if I took the time to put more effort into it.
Absolutely.
And you can get repped as an artist to have your illustrations printed on anything from cards to really any sort of two-dimensional fabric, whatever else. I don't have a representative.
I
don't
just
have an
came
agent
up
for
with
that.
another great idea.
Okay, I'm listening.
All right. So you take the kids in your class and you turn them into a kind of a clay or sweatshop, right? And then you set them to the task of doing this work for you.
Why didn't I think of that earlier when I'm packaging all these
I
Christmas cards for the market this
know.
weekend? They don't need to work on their final project. They'll be fine. You all get A's. It's fine. Wow, I didn't know this was such a great idea session. We need to do this more often.
I didn't think so either. Yeah, we just pop in, record our ideas for the world, and then somebody will go off and make them.
Yeah. I'm going to call you up the next time I feel stuck.
So that's cool. So you do make your own cards. I've seen them. They're glorious.
Thank you.
They're absolutely glorious.
I have a new one that I'm really excited about. So I have to share this. So like I said, I love doing animals. Sorry, I'm interrupting, but
No, you're not. It's you.
I think it's pretty good. I wish I had the visual here. I decided to do a card of a chameleon because I was like, how fun would a chameleon be to paint, you know, with their like eye and their like color changing. And a lot of my animal cards have like, I've kind of started doing like some kind of like pun with them. So I originally thought of, okay, it could be like a romantic card. Like, I got my eye on you. And then I give my sister credit for this. I was FaceTiming with her last Friday and I held it up to the screen and I showed it to her and she's like, oh, that's so great. You need to make a Christmas card with that. Put a Santa hat on him.
Oh my goodness.
And the pun should be, I see you when you're sleeping.
Oh, wow. That's perfect. Did you? Have you?
I don't know if it's that funny. She was cracking up hysterically.
Good.
And I did show it to a couple of people and I think it's pretty cute.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I like that.
So for those of you coming to the Winter Farmers Market, look for the chameleon card with a Santa hat.
Yeah.
Anyway, what were you going to actually say?
I don't remember. I think I was just making a joke about you building a sweatshop.
Yeah. That would be, yeah. If I guarantee them A's, that could be pretty lucrative, right?
Do you ever think about, I mean, I know you kind of have your own business, right?
Yeah.
Do you ever think of when you see these, okay, now I'm getting into nefarious deeds. So I'm sorry about this. Mm-hmm. Do you ever look at what your students are doing and think, I could probably use a person like this to help me do X,
like
Y,
an
and
apprentice?
Z? Yeah.
If I made more money, yeah, because I would want to pay them.
Right.
So that would be the only way fair to do that. No, that's actually a really interesting question because there are other artists at Mainframe that do have an apprentice or some sort of, somebody that they like interns with them, I guess.
Yeah, but they don't get to see the work effort, the results, and all that stuff. And shoot me down if this is like, I don't know, what is it called? I know it's not called malfeasance. I got my big words down, but like, what is it called when you really shouldn't do that thing, even though, you know what I'm saying?
Malfeasance might be an okay word for that.
I don't know, but I mean, would it be, because they shoot out into the world, you've already seen what Jenny or Tom can do, and then you're like, well, look, maybe you come and make whatever for me.
That's an interesting thought. Yeah, like thinking like from a business perspective. I guess it's not a thought that I've had because my work feels so personal to me. Mm-hmm. Like for example, like I was thinking of like apprentices or interns for other artists. Like a printmaker, for example, something that is creating multiples in that sense. I guess, yes, there are tasks that I could have them do, like the packaging cards. So for my Christmas cards, I outsourced and I had a printer actually print and trim and score some of those for me because I'm doing it in a larger quantity. Sure. But in small quantities, I do a lot of that stuff myself. So yeah, there are, I guess, I think about like the repetitive tasks. But they need to learn that too, right? That is a good thing to learn. And I worked a production job for a few years in addition to doing freelance when I quit my corporate job. And I think I was actually talking to my dad about this over the weekend, who also back in the day worked some sort of factory job in his youth, right, over the summer. And I think that's a really good job to have for a little while to learn some of those skills and to work efficiently like that.
You'd get experience working in a studio.
Yeah.
You probably get some studio time out of it.
This is such a good idea session. I'm like thinking to myself now, which student would be good to do that?
Hopefully they watch this so they know.
I got to make it competitive. I can't pick favorites. No, that would be really cool to see if I would have any interest in that.
Why wouldn't you pick favorites?
I would, because I would want somebody that I know I can trust that would do a good job. Okay, yeah. So, yeah. No, I guess I meant I would want to make sure I offer it,
Let everybody who wants to apply and just know that you're not going to get it because I like Brady's work better.
Exactly. I mean, let's be honest. Teachers have favorites.
I'm not going
to help it.
I'm not going to ask you for your favorite this year, but I want to know after we stop recording.
Okay.
I know I won't know the person, but I'd like to know who that person is. I don't know why, so I can be in the inner circle or something. I don't know.
I will say in general, as an art teacher, it's not necessarily the best artist, but it's often somebody that's talented, but also somebody that is curious and challenges themselves and is kind to others and gives great feedback to their peers, like somebody that actually, I guess, a real presence and personality within the studio space.
So let's say that you did go down this path.
Yeah.
And let's say that there was the one quality that you would seek that would make somebody shine above the rest.
Yeah.
What would that possibly be? Like knowing your students.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to pop in your mind. They do this thing. Mm-hmm. and that might be the thing that would get them over the threshold. And then maybe your students listen to this, and maybe they would know who that person is, but also maybe it would inspire them to maybe try to mimic that.
So now I'm like thinking of like, what are the skills that I like want them to
Yeah.
have that I can push? The thing that immediately comes to mind though is attention to detail and precision, particularly in my second class at Grandview, Principles of Design. That is like a lot of like cutting and trimming and straight lines and like it's stuff that, some people are naturally sloppy, and I'm like, but that's not gonna fly in the real world. Like, use a ruler.
It sounds a lot like that show, The Bear.
Heard of it, haven't seen it. But
Jacob, is it called The Bear? Yeah. Okay.
It's the one about the restaurant,
the
right?
restaurant.
In Chicago, I think.
Yeah, and it's all about what you just said.
Okay.
Paying attention, doing it right, all the details. It's
following
like
directions too, as simple as that is. Meticulous, yes.
Yeah.
And there are some students that really stand out as doing meticulous work. I
think you would find that show really good.
I need to watch that.
If you're into the details and stuff like that, it really pushes it. It also pushes down the idea of the trauma.
Really?
Of sticking with the details and sticking with it. And it's a very trauma-oriented show.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
But it is good, and I think it does help people understand trauma in a very weird way.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah.
I like that.
But when you said that, that was the first thing I thought of, because it's always like, yes, chef. And then it says, you did it wrong, do it again. You did it wrong, you do it again.
And I think that comes back to what you said about needing to learn, like, okay, we're all going to make mistakes.
Yep.
You're all going to get rejected at some point. How do you use that as something to learn from? And it hurts. It sucks to be rejected.
And it's a harsh thing in that show.
Yeah, I bet.
It's a harsh thing.
Restaurant culture
but at the end of the day, you're all still friends, and you just you get a little bit tougher at the end of that. So it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. No, I think that's an interesting point to make. One thing that I worked on since last spring, and I kind of mentioned getting like a rep or an agent as an artist or an author or both as like a literary agent, something that I'm currently seeking. And you put work out there and you get a lot of rejections. And it's never fun to get one of those in your inbox.
You put your work out there and some agent said that they didn't want to represent you?
Oh, plenty.
Really?
Yeah, that's just true of the industry. You talk to any author, illustrator, you're going to get a lot of rejections before somebody picks you up, most likely.
An agent, though, somebody who's going to just try to get you work. They're like, I can't get this girl work.
It's personal preference.
Huh.
It's a competitive industry. There's a lot of talented people in it.
Okay.
It's subjective. Each agent has their own preferences of what they like to rep. And also, I mean, many of them, I would say, too, it comes from a place of, I don't feel like I'm the right advocate for this. I'm not passionate enough about it. And you want somebody who's passionate about your work to rep you,
sure,
right? Like,
absolutely.
That's how it's going to sell. But point being, I think I've done pretty well, and I'm trying to keep up the mindset of get a rejection. It's like, okay, and I have my spreadsheet of all that I've submitted to, and I keep track of that. It's like color coded. It's like, okay, if I get a new rejection, that means I need to put another one out there in the world, right? It's like the message in the bottle, and I've lost track. I mean, at some point, I usually have about like 15 or so out there. They're just like floating out there that I'm waiting to hear back on. Could take anywhere from like 3 weeks to 6 months. Just depends.
Sure.
Competitive industry.
They
You get a ton of submissions.
Sure.
So I've tried to kind of flip that narrative of, okay, it sucks to get a rejection. It's not personal. It's subjective. And that's one less out there. So I need to put another one out there because it's a numbers game.
I read a book once
Yeah.
about, I don't remember the name of it right offhand, but it was about the CIA agent who invented the task force for kidnapping and going in and negotiating with a kidnapper. And one of the things he said, the first thing he had to get to was a no. And then after he got that rejection of the no, then he could work on getting the yes. You have to know where their no is before you can work on their yes.
Yeah.
And so that kind of applies to a lot of things, and in anything really, like asking for a raise, trying to get a job, trying to find somebody to do work, right? You have to get to a no first. Finding a romantic partner, you have to figure out what their no is before you can work towards getting a yes.
Yeah. It's a learning curve with that. I think, excuse me, I think one of the things I talk to my college students about too, all experiences are good, right? Even if it's to get a job that's not, what you wanted right out of college, and you end up quitting it because it's not fulfilling or whatever, at least now you're one step closer to knowing what you do want, right? To that yes that actually is going to fulfill you or lead you in the right direction.
And we're talking about a job in illustrating, though. We're not even talking about the job that they probably currently hold as they're going through school.
Like a career
Because a lot
outside
of
of with
people
their
leave
graduating
college
degree.
and don't get to do
Exactly
what they want to do.
Yeah, probably especially within the arts too, depending.
Well, I mean, they don't say starving artist for a reason, right? So
I like to cook. I'm pretty well fed.
yeah,
I'm doing all right.
so's Brandon, right?
Yeah, because I'm around.
Yeah, right. He's probably like me. He'd probably eat cheese and crackers for dinner, right? Yeah,
I'm not
I
saying
love
yes.
that
I'm
about
just
him.
nodding at you, Rich.
I love that about him. Okay, so you're going to send these people out in the world soon. Do you ever hear from them afterwards?
Yeah, that's actually probably the most, if not one of the most fulfilling things as a teacher is that, I do. I love being able to still connect with former students. And I think hopefully it's a mark of that I do a good job and that, they want to still know me after they graduate, especially at Mainframe Studios. I would say often most first Fridays that we do every month, our open house, I get a former student come by and say hi, that are excited to see me. It could even be like, I had one time a student from Grandview, it was maybe a year or two had gone by and I felt terrible. I couldn't remember her name at the time, but she waltzed into my studio, was so excited to see me and was telling me about like the dating life of a bunch of other people that were in that class. And I was like, do not need to know that, but thank you for that info. But she was super excited to see me and I was glad to see her. And I love to hear like, what are you doing now? And success stories with that. And I think to myself a lot too. And it was an interesting moment yesterday when we were doing our senior portfolio reviews at Drake because one of the reviewers is a former professor of mine who is still here in Des Moines and has become, a friend as now that I've graduated, an adult in my own right. And she was a professor that I, as a student, was like, oh, wow, she's so cool. I want to be like her when I grow up.
You want to be the cool professor?
Yeah.
All right.
And now, maybe it sounds a little full of myself, but I think I am that cool
You're
professor.
the cool professor? Nice.
I like to think that I am.
I love that for you.
Thank you. But again, there is a lot of imposter syndrome wrapped around that. I feel like I'm more used to it now. But yeah, it has been some moments where like, like tables have turned, but also they haven't because I have a good story on this. I still very much feel like a student in the sense that I'm always learning something.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is a good thing. I hope to always be learning something. I don't want to just be comfortable with it. But actually, when I started teaching at Grandview first, did that for a few years, and then Drake ended up hiring me the first year I taught there as a visiting assistant professor, which is basically
That's
fancy
a whole lot of words.
Basically, it means that you don't have a master's degree, but we'll pay you a salary and give you benefits for a year.
Okay.
Instead of making you an adjunct professor. It was
Which
great.
doesn't sound too bad. Anyway.
Not bad at all. Anyway, so I was a Drake student myself, and there's still, like a student ID number linked to my name. This was before I started teaching there. So, in preparation to go teach, I had to go to like the student center and get my new ID. And, they had my old photo that was taken. Actually, it would have been prior to me being a college student because they took it like the summer before. So I would have been 17, maybe 18, depending on when in the summer it was.
Okay.
So really old at this point. I'm 32 now. And I had them update the photo. They printed out the ID. They gave it to me. And I'm like halfway across campus walking with my ID. And I look down at it. And it still says student. They forgot to change to say professor on there. And I'm like, this feels so fitting, actually.
Yeah.
Because I don't feel like a
kind of put you in your place
now.
in a little way. They didn't mean to.
They didn't mean to. It was so ironic, and it just made me think. So I went back and had to fix it, but it has been a process of leaning into that career. And when I first started doing that, there was a lot of not even am I capable of this, but do I deserve like the respect and, the title of professor? My sister has her PhD and is also a professor of art history, not of art, but she went through all that schooling and call her Dr. Rush. Like she earned that. She's
very serious about that.
I did have a student last spring. As many times as I correct him, I was Dr. Sedovic. I'm like, I appreciate that, but that's not me.
That's not me.
I'm actually okay. I tell students, you can call me Professor Sedovic, you can call me Professor, you can call me Miss Sedovic, you can also call me Claire, and many of them do.
Yep.
Our professors were pretty
Our people are
relaxed.
pretty cool.
I called a lot of mine by their first name because they said that was okay.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm comfortable with that. At the beginning, I definitely was more comfortable with that and not the professor thing. But
Right.
I've taught enough years now. I'm like, yes, I've earned this.
Yeah, I'm here.
But
get used to it.
yeah.
Sure. Oh, I love that. That's amazing. So, what is on the horizon for you? I know you're doing the children's book, but there's got to be other things that what are you projecting towards? I ask all the tough questions, by the way.
I have an answer for you. I was just talking to my therapist about this earlier
Nice.
today, Rich.
Now we're in therapy again. Let's go. Let's fucking go.
Yes. Yeah, so I mentioned it has been a goal for a long time since I got into the illustration career to not just be published as an illustrator now, as I've got some of that under my belt, but also as an author and to have representation for that. An art or a literary agent is basically like the go-between, so they can get in contact with like the gatekeepers, so to speak. So like the publishers that aren't open to unsolicited submissions, which many aren't. So you just never have an opportunity to even submit your work to them if you don't have somebody that is repping you. They make money when you make money. So it's a symbiotic relationship. So ideally that would help make it a more lucrative career. Not that I want to quit teaching. I do want to continue teaching. But it would be nice. I see in the future that balance might change a little bit.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, there's other things with that, with, having a family and things like that I see woven in along with that.
Sure.
So yeah, I plan on continuing to get art. I'm going to continue my submissions. So hopefully at some point I do get somebody that wants to rep me. And with that, I enjoy illustrating books for other authors. It's great to be hired to do that. And there's things that are really challenging and interesting about that, but at the end of the day, I do love having that full autonomy to write and illustrate. So that would be the ultimate goal that it could happen without an agent. I've been submitting directly to some publishers for this particular piece that I've been querying.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, ideally it would be with an agent as well that's passionate about that piece. So yeah, I'm going to keep writing and illustrating.
How difficult it must be for a writer to find an artist, but they're not the ones actually finding the artist. It's the publisher, I think you've told me before.
Yeah.
So they don't even really have much of a hand in it.
Yeah, it depends on, if you're some really well-known author, you probably would have some say in that. And maybe if you're publishing with a smaller publisher, they might say, here's 3 artists we're looking
pick
at.
one of
Give
these
us an
3.
opinion.
Yeah, it should give us an
But yeah,
opinion.
for the most part, it surprises people to know that if you are traditionally published, and by that I mean not self-published,
Yes.
which is a fine way to do it. There's a lot of people that do these days.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to go through a publisher, yeah, they will have their editor, the art director, the designer. That group of people will choose who the illustrator is, which sounds maybe odd that the author has to give up that control. I mean, their manuscript, their book, that's their baby, right?
Yeah,
They've
yeah.
spent just
And
as long on it.
Imagine as they're writing it, even in a children's book, which isn't generally that long,
Mm-hmm.
but you're writing words that a character is saying, and then what you're envisioning. And there's sometimes when I envision something in my head that I'm going to draw, it almost never comes out what I wanted in the first place. So then you imagine a writer writing something down and envisioning what it's going to look like. And then next thing they know, they've got a book and it looks nothing like what they envision in their head.
Right.
I really would wonder, what kind of damage that does to them when they're like, oh, this isn't really what I wanted. And obviously it looks great because they wouldn't, if the people trying to make money off of this book wouldn't pick something that was bad.
Right. Yeah.
So
I think you're right. There's an interesting tension there. I don't know, at least not from the author side, I don't know anybody that's gone through that. I was like, oh, I really, really don't like this illustrator and the work they did. I would say, the reason it works that way is because just like I went to school to learn how to draw and design, somebody that's an editor, an art director that works at a publishing house, they have the degree, they have the expertise in choosing what they think is the right pairing with that. So yeah, that's their wheelhouse. But yeah, there can be authors can have an opinion in the sense that within reason, in your manuscript, you can include what are considered illustrator notes.
Mm-hmm.
So in brackets,
Nice.
it's meant to be utilized as more an indication of something that's not evident in the script itself, in the writing.
Yeah.
So less so, the main character has brown hair and blue eyes. Well, is that actually really pertinent and important to the story, or can you let the illustrator choose that?
Right.
Because that's the illustrator's autonomy, right?
Right.
That's where I get to have fun. But if it's something like, it's a spooky story and there's like somebody like peering around the door and it's not in the script, or maybe it's something oftentimes in humor, in a humorous children's book, right? A lot of humor can be
seen
the disconnect
not
between
read.
the art and the writing, and that's what's funny.
Yeah.
So that might be the note that, some characters hiding in the background, you don't see them, or that's not a great example, but you get the idea, right? Yeah. So that can be utilized. So you can have some of that control as an author as well.
So I asked the question, like, how do you think maybe the writer feels? Now, you get a book that you've got to illustrate, and what goes through your mind, your body, your soul when you think, how do I captivate for this writer their vision? Like, how much stress is that? I feel like that would stress me way out.
That's a good question. I will say the past couple of books, those authors have been happy with my work. I've heard that, so that's nice to hear.
Hopefully I didn't just unlock a new fear for you.
Well, this sounds kind of callous, Rich. I don't know that I think that much about it that way. I think I'm excited to get the manuscript. It's like, okay, this is mine now, in a word. Again, I know it's not. Like, obviously, like, it takes a village, right? Like, a book is not created by one person. Even if I write and illustrate it, there's an editor, there's an art director, there's a designer, there's many other people involved in that process. But no, I kind of, unless I get some notes that in some cases it has happened, make this character have brown hair. Does that really matter? Fine, I'll make it brown.
Right.
But no, I'm just excited to get to make the choices that I feel are best. And I think back to the authenticity that we were talking about, there's certain ways that I like to draw things that this is how I do it. And if that doesn't fit or they don't like that, then maybe I'm not the right choice for that.
Sure.
So yeah,
but they've already got a good idea of what you're going to do.
Right. Like, I've done that spec work. They should know. So yeah, I don't know that keeps me up at
amazing.
Night.
Okay.
It's a good question.
I love that for you that it doesn't. It just would for me.
I'm going to let you know if this is a new anxiety in the next couple of weeks, though. Blame you. Losing sleep over this.
Hopefully you can get straight through it. Hopefully you can get help in therapy. I'm never talking to this guy Rich again because he totally unlocked a whole new fear
with ideas,
for me.
terrible with anxiety.
Yes. So many people would tell you that that's true.
No.
Well, I love that for you. So you
thanks.
Got anything coming up? You've got the Christmas
market this weekend,
which is going to be where?
At the event center, so Hy-Vee Hall downtown. It'll be Friday from 10 to 2, Saturday 9 to 6, and Sunday 9 to 4, if I remember correctly.
How about further out? That seems small potatoes for you. So what kind of big stuff do you have on the horizon?
Stuff?
Just graduating kids, pushing them out into the world?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, I should be thinking about next semester, and I have my, details on what I'm teaching, but I'll be thinking about that in January when I have time to...
when you have time to wait, that's when they go into the next semester.
Well, fortunately for me, Grandview starts on January 6th, so yes, I do need to get ready for that.
Okay.
But I've taught that class many times before, so it'll be okay.
All right.
Drake has a J term, so they start a little bit later. So I got a little bit of wiggle room to get things back into gear after the holidays.
And when summer hits, what do you do?
That's a great question. I'm figuring that out. So.
Okay. So we don't know yet what summer's gonna.
Summer, I mean, I hope to be working on some sort of book project again. It's great when it pays. I need something that pays, obviously. Last summer I had 2 books that I was illustrating, and they overlapped, and I was very, very busy with that,
I bet.
Which is great. And the year prior to that, I think it was, I did a book that was going to be self-published. So I've consistently had a project. I think the thing I have to remind myself sometimes, kind of like I was saying with the first book, when I describe it to some people, some ways it sounds like, oh, well, that just fell into your lap. Like, you didn't have to sit down for an interview and get that job. And it's like, no, but in a more maybe subtle way, like I was, again, like putting down the crumbs so I could have that trail to follow to get what I wanted. So I do need to work on making a plan for that. I have stuff I want to work on when I have time, but... Yeah, it'll be a balance.
Huh. That's very interesting. So one last question.
Yeah.
In your home, do you have a small studio where you work, or do you always go to your other studio? And then how do you choose between the two?
Yeah, it's not a choice anymore.
It isn't?
It hasn't been for a long time, actually. Since I got my mainframe studio, I would say maybe there probably was a little bit of a transition period there. And I would work a little bit from home still. You know, it's like, oh, I want to draw in the evening or something, and I don't want to go to my studio. I want to be at home and be cozy. But you know, for me, because I love what I do, I have work-life balance, but also my work and my life are one and the same, you know? But at the same time, like I have my setup at my studio, like all my paint and my stuff like that. I don't like to take that out with me. Like if I'm going to do that, I want to be there. And it's also like, it's a space I enjoy being in. It's my happy place. Like I work best there.
So you kind of have a hard separation between the two.
I do
at
in
this
that
point.
sense, actually. Yeah. I spend a lot of time at my studio when I can. Also, it's a small space at home. So, you know, being considerate of others and
Right.
making space and not too much noise is important. But yeah, since I've had mainframe and now in my permanent space there, this is my second studio there, actually. It's come a long way.
Right. So did you get a bigger studio?
Smaller, actually.
You went down on
I went down in size.
Okay.
I originally was there on the 4th floor in the Drake studio. So Drake and Iowa State both have studios that they sponsor basically for an artist residency. As an alum, you can apply for it. They basically pay your rent for a year to do a body of work that you propose to do.
Okay.
You have to be chosen. Speaking of rejection, I was rejected the first 2 times that I tried to get it.
Okay.
The 3rd time was the charm.
Those bastards.
Right. No, it was actually a very kind professor who at least twice offered to represent me in
nice.
my application for that. So
Nice.
it worked out. But yeah, I actually downsized that studio. The Drake studio is a lovely studio. Higher price than I want to pay. And I don't need that much space because my work is not, I don't do like large scale splatter painting that I need a ton of room for.
Sure.
So it works for me.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming in and talking to me.
Thanks so much for having me. This has been great. And I have some ideas to walk away with, which is something I didn't expect.
We'll have to talk about it more.
We will.
Now, well, wait a minute. Okay, tell me who the student is.